The Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Firstly, as per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, that's very, very much appreciated. I had a lovely email from Paul at Brave New Spirits. They seem to be quite happy with my review, and hopefully they'll send me some more samples in due course to review if they're that happy. So yeah, all good there. Now, as I may have mentioned last week, I've got this week's episode of the show is a very special episode of the show, and as you can see from the title page, we're looking at the inaugural release of the West Midlands Distillery single malt. Now, a big thank you to Jordan from the distillery for the samples for today's episode of the show. It's very rare do I get the opportunity to do an episode of the show on something brand spanking new, you know, certainly a distillery's first release, so very much appreciate the time and effort that Jordan has gone to sort of send me samples, and hopefully I'll do a good job of them. But anyway, so as I've never done an episode of the show on the distillery before, a little bit of history, I think, but the distillery itself, I suppose, kind of begins well before the actual distillery was built, and basically it begins with a young Jordan tinkering in his bedroom. Take that as you will. No, so basically Jordan's mother Sharon, I believe, was involved in the pub trade, probably a landlady, ran pubs in and around the West Midlands, I believe. So, and instilled in Jordan this interest in distilling. Also, an uncle of his was a keen home brewer, and obviously taught him about brewing and stuff like that. Now my mother taught me how to cook and how to sew, which is eminently sort of useful skills, it has to be said, but I think I'd rather have been taught how to distill, shall we say. So here we have a young Jordan, sort of, you know, tinkering and sort of distilling hooch in his bedroom. Talking of hooch, do you remember that god-awful yellow flavoured, you know, RTD? Well, apparently they want to bring it back along with Bacardi Breezers. I mean, why? You know, there are certain things that I think should be condemned to history and stay in the past. Those RTDs and horrendously neon-coloured bloody drinks, flares, and mullets, yeah, they should all be, you know, well and truly condemned to history, I think. But anyway, so while most sort of teenage boys were out chasing girls and footballs and what have you, Jordan, like I said, was sort of distilling in his bedroom, and one thing led to another until eventually, along with a mate of his, Dean, they purchased a camper van in order to go to festivals, food festivals, and so on and so forth, and sell, you know, the spirits that they were distilling. One imagines white spirits, gin, vodka, that kind of thing. And obviously, you know, one thing led to another, and it got to the point where they had a very successful season, and Jordan had amassed enough money to basically sort of, you know, give himself a good 6 months to sort of you know, push things along, you know, and hopefully make a living out of distilling rather than having to sell stuff. And I'm sure that, you know, he was happy how things kind of turned out. So in 2018, Jordan opened the first distillery in Netherton in the West Midlands, obviously along with his mother Sharon, who was handling distilling duties and beverages. He also enlisted his sister Taryn, who also handled distilling as well as head of bar operations. There was also Jordan's brother-in-law Hamza Darby, who is apparently the lead designer and bar manager, and of course Dean, who is the distillery operations manager and lead distiller. So initially the focus of this new distillery was obviously white spirits and also commercial distilling, and apparently they now distill or produce spirits for around about 50 different brands, which is quite impressive, along with obviously their own gin, which it's a really nice gin. I know a lot of you are not really that keen on gin, and I haven't done a gin episode of the show in a donkey's years for obvious reasons, but the gin is called Dr. Emer's, and is pretty damn good, it has to be said. one of the interesting things is that when you look at the bottles, they're all kind of hand decorated with blobs of paint. I mean, I'm sure there's a horrendously time-consuming thing to do, I imagine some people probably that work at the distillery think, "Oh God, no, I haven't got to do that again, have I?" Because I mean, they're unique. They really look good, and then that's the point, you know, that. These days, obviously, it's not good enough just to sort of make a good gin, for example. There's so many other good gins on the market that on the shelf, your bottle has got to stand out, and they are very, very distinctive. And I think it's kind of like just shows you how sort of innovative and how sort of driven that sort of Jordan is, that he's producing this kind of stuff. Anyway, so. Moving on to the whole whiskey thing, I know that he visited a distillery, and I forget when that was exactly, and thought, I can do this kind of thing. And I don't know whether this was something that he always wanted to do. A lot of gin distillers and rectifiers kind of secretly want to make whiskey, but of course, obviously, making gin is fairly easy. You don't have to sort of, you know, stick it in barrels and all that kind of stuff. But obviously, whiskey, you do need to do so. Anyway, so in 2020, the distillery moved to a new site in Rowley Regis, which obviously had which was bigger and probably had a bigger room for paint splattering. So they installed a pair of copper alembic stills, which are quite cool. I always love that style, you know, with almost like the wizard's hat on the top. You know, it's kind of quite cool. And this is allowed because it's a small setup. Because I mean, basically, you know, it's gone 100% geek. I mean, you know, not only is he trying to distill interesting spirit, he's matching the spirit, i.e. the sort of like this, which variety of barley, varieties of yeast, and as you'll see when we talk about the individual bottlings, is tailoring his new make spirit to fit in with each of the different cask types he's using. And I believe he's even gone as far as he doesn't reuse the feints and the foreshots. Basically takes his cut, uses the middle cut, and then chucks the rest away. I mean, you know, who does that? I mean, that's just nuts. I mean, that's just geek city to the nth degree, I think. But anyway, so what we have here is the inaugural release, and these were all the bottlings were bottled on the 10th of August 2024, and only released obviously last week. So this is the first opportunity I've had to do an episode of the show. And well, the packaging, I will have to say, and I'll have to show you here, so bear with me a sec, is how cool is that? I mean, it's got a map of you know, of the West Midlands behind it, and this is obviously the Matriarch bottling, and how cool is that? But of course, as we know, frippery packaging, you know, all really a bit irrelevant at the end of the day, because it's the juice in the bottle that counts. And anyway, we're going to have a look at said juice. So let's have a look at the lineup. Invisible to the obvious. As you can see, I have 5 samples in front of me because there were 5 releases in this inaugural release, but only 4 single casks. And I think this is where Jordan is going to be at going forward in making single cask releases. So we're going to kick off with a first fill ex-Bourbon cask, ex-Buffalo Trace American Standard barrel. This was, I believe, distilled, I think all the spirit was distilled in 2021, obviously, like I said, bottled in August of last year at 52.1%. He's used Laureate and Plumage Archer barley and teamed that up with the sort of wonderfully named EC118 yeast and another strain of yeast called Kevit Voss. Now, obviously, I am not particularly well versed in yeast strains, so hopefully we'll find out how these all kind of combine as we go along and taste them. Bottling number 2, and you can see that's quite dark colour, is a Bourbon quarter cask. So this was a recoopered American Standard barrel. It was basically broken down to 125 litres, then recharred. Plumage Archer barley only, with a slightly different yeast, Kevik Hornindal. This was bottled at 53.8%. Bottling number 3 is an ex-plantation Caribbean rum cask. Again, barley strain is Laureate with Kevet Horndal yeast and Hercules yeast. Obviously it needs to do some heavy lifting. Yeah, okay. And this was bottled at 53.2%. Bottling number 4 is a Oloroso quarter cask. This was a fresh Oloroso quarter cask, and for this particular new make they use Maris Otter and Laureate barley and Kevet Voss yeast, bottled at 53.9%. And you're probably wondering what the final bottling is. The final bottling is the one that I showed you, which has been called the Matriarch. Now this has basically been bottled in memory of Jordan's mother, who unfortunately has since passed away. I don't know exactly when, but so this is obviously, as he's gone on record as saying, that if it hadn't been for his mother, he wouldn't be distilling whiskey. So I think it's a very very fitting tribute. So this is juice taken from all 4 of these casks, blended together and then bottled at 51.9%. So really looking forward to that one at the end. So there you go. That's the lineup. One's butt is full to overflowing, it has to be said. So let's kick off with a bit of bourbon. Okay, so let's see what the bourbon cask gives us on the nose then, shall we? That's a nice nose. Quite barleyed, floral barley, citrus, a little bit of honey, subtle American oak, just a little background of American oak. It's kind of adding a little bit of toffee. So I think you can probably go as far as saying this is pretty much the blueprint for the distillery character, although obviously you can't really say there's a definite distillery character because obviously all the raw materials are changing. But it's got obviously a sort of a lovely, it's unpeated, it's got a lovely aromatic quality, it's obviously fruit forward, although not sort of overly estery. It's got a lovely character. It's just a really lovely spirit, it has to be said at the end of the day. Let's sort of pass up. A little bit more oak to start off with on the palate. Creamy toffee, quite nippy spices. I love that spiciness. Again, we've got that floral barley kind of coming through on the mid palate. A little bit of almost minerality. It has a sort of a very citric, almost mineral kind of note on the mid palate. It's a little bit short, obviously, because of the alcohol. That's masking the finish a little bit. There's a slight chalkiness right on the very aftertaste. Again, lovely, clean, expressive, and for literally just a sort of like a 3-year-old whiskey that, like all of the modern distilleries are doing, tailoring certainly their fermentation, which I haven't touched upon because I don't really know too much about it, but I would imagine relatively long fermentation. We're probably talking, I would have thought, into the hundreds of hours, 120, probably even a little bit more, but we're not overly sort of estery, so it's got a nice fruitiness, really good quality spirit. Let's put a little drop of water with it and see what that does to it. That's lovely. It's made it wonderfully aromatic. This is the sort of whiskey that I love. It ticks all my boxes. Aromatic, floral, white fruit, slightly estery, honey, lime, apricot. Again, not overtly oaky. The oak is just in the background and it's kind of like sitting there, playing second fiddle, which is what I want. So I want the character of the spirit, and this has got plenty of character, as to be said. Let's see what that's like. Right, less oak now. Again, the oak is kind of pushed more into the background, so I'm getting more barley, more honey, a little bit more citrus, more lime, almost a touch of green apple now. I mean, that is a lovely spirit, really complex, wonderful length, lovely, just absolutely lovely, really, really nice. Right, okay, so let's move on to the second bottling. This is the quarter cask. So here we have just the plumage arch of barley and a different yeast strain, Kevet Hornendal. Right, okay, so straight off the bat, totally different. I mean, yes, there's a lot of oak, it's big and it's chunky, but the spirit is quite robust as well. More toast, more charred oak, more... It's got an almost kind of cider apple-y character. I'm not getting the floral barley notes that I got on the first bottling, so it's kind of leading me to believe that the Laureate barley is giving it that kind of floral barley character. As an unsweetened pineapple, ginger, more spices, more oak. I mean, it's intense, don't get me wrong, and it kind of, I don't mean this sort of in a negative fact, but it feels like a component, I felt exactly the same way about Lindor's, that altogether their final blend was absolutely fantastic, but the individual components were, for obvious reasons, very heavy on the sherry and the STR and what have you. But I mean, this is not an unpleasant nose, don't get me wrong, I mean, but it's obvious, lots of oak, lots of toastiness. It has that sort of almost kind of buttery, cider apple-y kind of character. It's really intense and really gingery as well. Anyway, let's see what that's like. It actually feels a bit younger than the previous bottling, but I would imagine it's 3 years old, like the ex-Bourbon. It's a bit raw is probably the wrong word, but it's got that kind of feeling to it. Again, toasty oak, tight, intense, quite gingery tannins. Yeah, I mean, it is intense, it's impressive, but we're talking more oak character here, and that's why it's kind of, to me, it feels a little bit more like a component part, shall we say. Anyway, let's put a little bit of water with it. Got wonderful length, in actual fact, has to be said. I mean, once you kind of get past the sort of the alcohol, the aftertaste is like all this toasty oak and what have you. I mean, it's a lovely whiskey, it has to be said, don't get me wrong. Okay, so we're a little bit lighter on the oak now, so we're a little bit more towards the previous bottling, but again, it doesn't have that kind of floral note, it doesn't have the citrus. It's got a more robust spirit, and this is obviously where Jordan has decided this type of spirit is going to be better suited to the quarter casks. Yeah, let's see what that's like. Okay, there's a better balance now with a little drop of water. It has knocked the oak back a little bit, so it's not so oak-centric. I'm getting some barley now, a little, and that's more of that cider apple kind of character coming through as well. Nicely spiced, still quite toasty, longer. Again, where I absolutely loved the Bourbon cask, I like this, but it does feel a bit like a component part, but quality-wise, stuff.
Don't you know these tears are here for
okay, so let's move on to the Caribbean rum cask release. So Laureate barley, so we're back to that one, with Kevet Hornendal and Hercules yeast. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Right, okay, so we're back in the first the first bottling territory. It has that lovely aromatic floral barley character, an obvious sweet tropical fruit, apple, apricot, pineapple, peach, subtler oak, quite minerally, not a little bit of minerals, it's really quite minerally again. Now I don't know what the sort of water source that the distillery uses, and I don't know whether the water is as hard as it is over here in Nottingham, but it certainly has quite a mineralness to it, shall we say. I like that. I mean, that's a lovely nose. That's really nicely balanced. It's not too OTT on the rum either. It's just really well balanced. Let's see what that's like. Juicy, tropical, very rummy, very crowd pleasing. I can see a lot of people are going to love this. There's a lovely sweetness there, a little bit of granulated sugar. A bit masked, the finish is a little bit masked, which is not a surprise. There's a touch of white chocolate coming through on the end. I mean, that's lovely. I can see a lot of people absolutely killing for this particular bottling because it is just, as we know, a lot of people have sweet tooths, has that sweetness, but it's not overly sweet, and it's really nicely rummy. That's worked absolutely amazingly well. Right, so again, a little bit of water, it's knocked back the oak, as often is the case. More of that floral barley, but closer in style now to the ex-Bourbon cask for obvious reasons. It's the link is obviously the Laureate barley. A bit sweeter possibly. It's still got that richness of rummy kind of tropical fruit, but it's a little bit better balanced now for me. Sort of pass that. Again, less oak, more of that floral barley, more of the sweet fruit as well, but the alcohol still offsets that sweetness. It's not sickly sweet, it's not too sweet, it's just about right, said Mummy Bear. I like that. That's a lovely, lovely whiskey, and like I said, I think a lot of people are going to love that particular bottling. That is just spot on, really worked well. Okay, so let's move on to the Oloroso quart cask. Yeah, you can see the colour from that. Yeah, it's picked up a hell of a lot of sherry. And it has indeed picked up a lot of sherry. I mean, this is the thing. First fill cask, we know you're going to get a lot of the cask character. Make it a quarter cask, you're going to get a lot of cask character in a very short period of time. And yeah, there's a lot of Oloroso, there's a lot of raisinated fruit. Again, the spirit feels quite young underneath it. It's got that kind of slight rose petally, kind of marry kind of character. Maybe that's the Maris Otter. Maybe the Maris Otter needs a little bit more time. Who knows? It's got a darker, maltier character, and I'm not just talking about the darkness of the obvious raisinated fruit. The spirit underneath that has a bit more of a darker kind of character. And again, I can see where he's gone with making this new make to kind of key in with that style of whiskey. It's kind of, or with the cask, I think, and it works really well. It has to be said. I mean, you can't argue that you can get spirit character here, even though it is very sherry orientated, and it has that lovely moist fruit cakey kind of character. And again, I think people are going to love this because there are a lot of people that seem to be that like this kind of overly sherried whiskey. But like I said, there is some balance there. Let's see what it tastes like. I think, like the Bourbon quart cask, it very much comes across as a kind of component part. It's very sherried. There's a little bit of youthful rose petally spirit coming through, but there's not a great deal of complexity aside from what you're getting from the cask with raisinated fruits. It's very silky, very soft. It's only slightly masked. I mean, the finish is really long, but it's very sherried. It's not quite one-dimensional, but like I said, it kind of comes across very much as a component. And like I said, nothing at all wrong with that, and there are people that are going to sort of love that kind of style. As you know, it's not my cup of tea. More herbal on the nose now. The sort of the diluted. It's kind of brought out more of the herbal Oloroso. Less fruit, less of the raisinated fruit. Yeah, I mean, it's okay. It's a sherry whiskey at the end of the day, and it doesn't have the complexity of the other three, but I can see the point of it. Let's see what it tastes like. it's emphasised that youthful rose petal kind of character, and it does seem to sort of like play into the sort of narrative of lots of sherry. Maybe the spirit is not quite evolved enough, and it's part, again, it feels like part of a component part. Again, quality is absolutely superb, no blemishes. They've obviously sourced their sherry casks really well, and to be honest with you, I wouldn't have expected anything less from Jordan, to be honest with you. And yeah, not totally my cup of tea, it has to be said, but nevertheless a really good bottle. Right, okay, and so on to the final bottle of this afternoon. This is the Matriarch, so this is a blend of all 4 of the previous casks. So, and as far as I'm aware, it's not like they've picked another 4 different casks to blend together. As far as I'm aware, that some of the juice from all of these casks was blended. I imagine they blended this first, and then whatever was left over was bottled individually. But anyway, let's see what nose gives on this end, shall we? That is a lovely nose, it has to be said. So I'm getting the aromatic, the floral barley, I'm getting the laureate kind of character. There's a little bit of toffee, there's a little bit of cider apple, some oak. I mean, obviously, as we're looking at sort of predominantly American oak with a little bit of rum and sherry, we are more American oak character from the off. It's certainly got the quarter cask and the first fill cask notes, and it's got the laureate character, it's got the floralness. There's a little bit of rumminess coming through. I'm getting a little bit of pineapple, a little barley, a little bit of toasted oak, some pear, touch of raisinated fruit, not too much sherry. And this is the key, the balance of this is frankly superb, it has to be said. Jordan has done just a stunning job of blending this together. And for me, this is just a tour de force, it has to be said. You can't argue that this is not a stunning whiskey. Testament to his mother and being called the Matriarch, I think. So well balanced, just absolutely lovely. And you know, and unless you're fortunate enough to be able to buy all of the 5 bottles in the range, you're probably never going to sort of get to see how this all kind of like is blended into one. And you know, again, a big thank you to Jordan for the samples. Just fascinating. Anyway, let's sort of pass on. Again, stunning balance. Kicks off with the American oak, the floral barley, the honey, the citrus, moves into sort of like raisinated fruits and toasted oak on the mid palate. The cider apple character is there. A little bit of bitter chocolate, coffee. The tannins are sort of like noticeable but not too noticeable. It's just really harmonious. It's a little masked but not too much. You can quite happily drink that without any water whatsoever. Stunning. Frankly stunning. And I'm getting, now just burped, and I'm getting a kind of rum cask notes coming back at me. Yeah, I know you really wanted to know that, didn't you? Let's see what this is like now. Very much the same as it's neat. It's probably a little bit more floral, a little bit more of the laureate barley, a little bit more sort of estuary, sort of sub-estuary, not overly estuary, just sub-estuary fruit. A little bit of spice. It's probably brought out a little bit of the youthful note, the sort of, certainly the youthful rose petally note that I found on the sherry quarter cask. So personally, I think neat is absolutely fine with this. Let's sort of pass on. That's lovely. That's mouth-filling, juicy. It's a little bit more kind of less complex, I guess, than when it was neat. So again, like I said, I really don't think this particular bottling needs a little drop of water, but it doesn't do it any harm. It kind of, yeah, sort of softens up the edges, I suppose. But either way, that is a stunning whiskey, it has to be said.
With your silhouette.
episode of the show. One thing I didn't actually mention earlier on, because I completely forgot, was that each of the 4 casks were chosen to represent each of the 4 founding members of the distillery. So sort of, Jordan, Taryn, and Hamza, and so on and so forth. And frankly, I mean, this is the quality of what they're releasing at 3 years of age. Then, they're going to go on, and it's going to be really, really impressive. It's a distillery that's certainly worth watching and looking at. I think the sort of, for me, and you guys know my kind of taste in whiskey. The Bourbon cask was the star. It has to be said. Well, maybe it was overshadowed by the Matriarch at the end, but I think as a single cask, that was what really floated my boat. It has to be said. I loved the floralness. I loved the character of the spirit. Not too much oak, harmony, and I bang on about sort of balance and harmony, and that just had it in absolute spades. The Bourbon quarter cask, like I said, a little bit heavy on the cask character for obvious reasons, because when it was blended into the others, it gave the element that they were looking for, and this is the whole point of component parts. Yes, they on their own, they're not really designed to be drunk and tasted on their own, because they're kind of like the whole point of them is to sort of form a greater whole, if you like, I suppose. And so on its own, you can see why it is what it is. Not my, as a sort of standalone bottle on its own, not my favourite of the 4 or 5, I suppose to say, but you can see the whole point of it. The Caribbean rum cask finish, again, really nicely balanced, not too much Caribbean rum character. I mean, I can see people dying for this. It just has that sweetness, that balance. It was just a lovely whiskey, and yeah, absolutely spot on. And the Oloroso quarter cask, again, I think the same can be said for the Bourbon quarter cask. It's a component part. It's there to do a job. It maybe doesn't necessarily work so well on its own, but that's probably because that's not its kind of point, if you like. And the Matriarch, stunning. Absolutely stunning. It's kind of the sum of the parts, if you like. And if Jordan was the one behind the blending of it, then Jordan has done a fantastic job at blending that to get the balance just absolutely spot on. I don't know how long it kind of took him to sort of do that, but absolutely spot on. It just had all the characteristics of the other 4 casks just in the right amount, and was just absolutely spot on, just perfect. And all I can say is that sort of, if you are fortunate enough to get hold of some of these releases, then absolutely brilliant. If not, I believe this is going to be a kind of an ongoing kind of thing, whether they will do a sort of a yearly release of the same kind of thing, I honestly don't know. I'm not in Jordan's head, and that's probably a good point, I suppose. But anyway, all I can say is that this distillery is worth keeping an eye on. And as you know, I kind of love English distilleries, and when they're relatively local, even better. I mean, Nottingham itself doesn't have a whiskey distillery, so this is going to be, well, if you ignore White Peaks up in Derbyshire, it's probably, I don't know, is it the closest? It may well be the closest, but anyway, doesn't really matter. Stunning whiskies. Big thank you to Jordan and all the guys at the distillery. You're doing a wonderful job. Hopefully you guys have picked up a bottle. If you haven't, keep an eye out for them, and like I said, certainly give them a shout. Anyway, until next week, I don't know where I'm going to be going next week, but I mean, hopefully it'll be a good episode of the show. So until then, all that's left to say is good afternoon and good ramming.